Good evening. I'm General Tony McPeak. I'm retired, have been for a while, but for 37 years I was in the U.S. Air Force as a fighter pilot and ended up running the organization as the Chief of Staff. You're going to see tonight something about the air war in Korea. It was our first war as an independent Air Force, the first war fought by people wearing blue uniforms. And it was the first war of the jet age, the F-86 against the MiG-15. We learned an awful lot there because the MiG-15 was a better airplane in many ways. So you'll see some of that tonight, and I hope you enjoy it. Good luck and good flying.
These are the planes that won the Battle of Midway, that bombed the heart out of Hitler's Germany. The planes that fought the air war over the jungles of Indochina and the deserts of Iraq. These are the planes that define the meaning of air power. These are the legends of air combat.
Korea was the first jet-on-jet war in military history, but it was not the first time jets saw combat.
Three planes, 9 o'clock, coming around.
The war in the skies over Nazi Germany in World War II was the largest air campaign in history.
B-17 out of control at 3 o'clock.
In the early days of the war, the German Luftwaffe ruled the skies. From the Atlantic to the Ural Mountains, from Norway to North Africa, German air power crushed its foes and made blitzkrieg by the Panzer forces possible. But by the fall of 1944, it was a different story. More than 100,000 Luftwaffe aircraft were lost between 1939 and 1944, while 320,000 pilots and aircrew were killed and 230,000 seriously injured. Not only had Germany lost its air superiority, lost in all theaters by 1944, but many of the aircraft that remained in frontline squadrons were outclassed by their Allied counterparts. Yet the fact remained that if the German command had exploited certain technological advantages its Air Force enjoyed, they might have made an appreciable difference in their military fortunes. On July 25, 1944, a British pilot reported that his Mosquito encountered an aircraft of incredible speed high over southern Germany. That aircraft was the Messerschmitt Me-262 turbojet, known as the Schwalbe or Swallow. By April of 1944, the U.S. Army Air Force was sending streams of B-17s on bombing missions over Germany by day, while the British sent their Lancasters over at night. At times, more than 1,000 aircraft filled the sky. Escorting the B-17s were the long-range P-51 Mustang fighters. Sleek fighters that could roam deep into the skies over the Third Reich. Hermann Goering and his staff hoped that they would be able to deploy the Me-262 at just the right time to take on the deadly P-51s and put a serious hitch in the Allied strategic bombing campaign over Nazi Germany. German fighter ace and air defense chief Adolf Galland said that when he first flew an M-262 jet fighter, it was like being pushed by angels. At about 100 miles per hour faster than any propeller-driven fighter, the jet was the defensive weapon Galland had been looking for, capable of penetrating any fighter cover that might be escorting the bombers. Hitler did not agree. Obsessed with the search for an offensive secret weapon to win the war, the Fuhrer insisted that the Me-262 be developed as a bomber. Against Hitler's wishes, a small number of Me-262 jet fighters were produced and sent to combat units. In addition to the standard fighter, the Germans produced the first night fighter jet, the Me-262B-1A. Equipped with a long wavelength radar and superior homing gear, this machine became a deadly force in the hands of the right pilot. In fact, Luftwaffe Commando Kurt Welter became one of the first jet aces, scoring 20 Allied kills, likely the highest number of kills by a jet pilot in history. When all was said and done, the Me-262A-1A Schwalbe, or Swallow, emerged as an impressive war machine, but it was deployed in too few numbers and much too late to save the Luftwaffe and Germany. Great Britain emerged from World War II with a decided head start in jet technology. The Royal Air Force was the only Allied Air Force to have had a jet fighter operational in squadron strength before the German surrender on May 8, 1945. This was the Gloucester Meteor, which first flew on March 5, 1943. On July 21, 1944, the first two production Meteors arrived at Combhead and formed the nucleus of No. 616 Squadron RAF. Appropriately, the Meteor's first duty was to defend Britain from attacks by German V-1 pulse jet-powered guided bombs, of which they destroyed 13 by the end of the war. Meteor 3s of No. 616 Squadron were committed to continental Europe in the last months of the conflict, but they never got the opportunity to meet the Me-262A in battle. A second wartime British fighter was the de Havilland DH-100 Vampire, whose design dated to 1941, but which did not become operational until 1946. Unlike the twin-engine Meteor, the Vampire had a single de Havilland Goblin II jet engine. Its tail surfaces consisted of a twin-boom arrangement similar to that of the American Lockheed P-38. On December 3, 1945, a naval version, the Sea Vampire, became the first pure jet aircraft to operate from an aircraft carrier. The United States was a relative newcomer to the jet age. Its emergence from World War II as the most powerful nation in the world, and its need to prepare against a mounting Soviet threat, spurred a mammoth American effort to develop jet aircraft. Although both American and Soviet jet designs were to get their greatest boost from the importation of British power plants and German swept-wing technology, American designers, encouraged by generous financial support from their government, produced the most extensive and imaginative range of jet designs to fly during the 1940s. The United States entered the jet age on October 2, 1942, when the Bell XP-59 made its first test flight from Muroc Dry Lake, now Edwards Air Force Base. Unfortunately, the new fighter's performance proved too disappointing for it to be committed to combat. Bell tried to improve the basic design with a more refined and more powerful twin-engine escort fighter, but the U.S. Army Air Forces had its eye on more promising designs that were waiting in the wings. One of those promising designs was the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which would live up to its name in the decade to follow. Designed by Clarence L. Kelly Johnson, William P. Ralston, and Don Palmer around a de Havilland HIB Goblin engine, the prototype XP-80 made its maiden flight on January 8, 1944, just 198 days after the USAAF approved its construction. Production versions of this outstandingly clean fighter, powered by General Electric or Allison jet engines, would serve with distinction over Korea. In October 1947, the U.S. Army Air Forces became the U.S. Air Force, USAF. In mid-1948, this new separate branch of the U.S. military redesignated all P or pursuit aircraft as F fighters, so the P-80 became the F-80 Shooting Star. The most noticeable trend during the 5 years following World War II was the transition from straight wings to swept wings. As early as 1935, it was suggested that swept-back wings would reduce drag at the sound barrier. The most successful jet fighter in the USAF during the late 1940s traced its origins to an unsuccessful Navy fighter. On November 27, 1946, the straight-wing North American XF-J-1 Fury made its maiden flight, but its performance was disappointing, and a Navy contract for 100 aircraft was reduced to 30. By that time, however, North American had learned of German swept wing development and was already applying it to a lengthened, more streamlined version of the Fury, with a 35-degree sweep to its wings. On October 7, 1947, test pilot George Welch took the XP-86 for its first flight, and on April 26, 1948, he broke the sound barrier in a dive. In June of that year, the P-86 became the F-86, and in March 1949, it was named the Sabre. With the added power of a GE J-47 engine, the F-86A jet became the best overall fighter of the 1950s and started a line of Sabre variants that would ensure its place among the great fighter aircraft of all time. On November 24, 1947, the U.S. Navy first flew the most successful carrier-based fighter of the period, the Grumman F-9F-2 Panther, which, like the USAF's F-84, later went on to acquire swept-back wings as the F-9F-6 Cougar. On October 14, 1947, Air Force Captain Charles E. Yeager, flying in a rocket-powered Bell XS-1 research plane over Muroc Dry Lake, became the first man to officially pass through the sound barrier when he hit a speed of 700 miles per hour, Mach 1.06. Although great effort and sacrifice were expended to build a jet airplane capable of sustaining level flight above Mach 1 during the 1940s, it would not be attainable until late 1952. If any major power felt left behind at the onset of the jet age, it was the Soviet Union. The first turbojet-powered flight to be conducted in Soviet airspace was made on August 5, 1945, when Colonel Andrei G. Pochetkov test flew a captured Me-262 near Moscow. The first Soviet-designed team jet to fly was the MiG-9, which took off on April 24, 1946. The MiG-9 was a completely original design, a mid-wing monoplane with two BMW 003 jets mounted side by side. Similar in performance to the Gloucester Meteor, the MiG-9 had a better thrust-to-weight ratio, but higher wing loading. As had been the case with the Americans, British jet engines and German research into swept-wing configuration radically accelerated Soviet jet development. In 1946, the British government allowed the export to the USSR of Rolls-Royce, Derwent, and Nene engines, as well as technical drawings, which the Russians promptly placed in licensed production as the RD-500 and RD-45, respectively. Renewed efforts were then made to take advantage of these new developments. With the British engine in hand, Mikoyan and Gerovich built an original swept-wing fighter around one of the imported British Nenes, the I-310, which first flew on December 17, 1947. Production using the RD-45 engine quickly followed under the designation of MiG-15. The MiG-15 was a distressing surprise to the West. The late 1940s had not yet established the definitive configuration for jet aircraft, but they had seen the genesis of its most fundamental elements. The decades to follow would see those fundamentals refined and expanded as man's quest to fly greater loads farther, higher, and faster applied itself to the jet age and the war in Korea.